Welcome to another episode of Contentstack Live with our host Jeff Baha. We're excited to have John Kelly, our Director of Product Management, joining us today to talk about previewing digital experiences in a headless environment. Let's dive in.
Hey, John, welcome to the program.
Hey, Jeff, how's it going, man?
Good. So this is first in a series that we're titling Power Productivity. And today the title, Previewing Digital Experiences in a Headless Environment. So let's get right into it. So headless technology, composable architectures, clearly all the rage. You, me, we all are living and breathing it. But there seems to be this like nagging narrative around, previewing content in this kind of like headless world or without a head. So can you help us shed some light on what's the issue? What are some of the challenges around that just kind of fundamentally?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important maybe to unpack a little bit kind of why headless is all the rage. And maybe we can take few steps back. It's fun to look back in the annals of history and kind of see what brought us to today. So if you look back at the jobs that people are hiring tools to do in this space, they're looking to synthesize and record their thoughts and tell a story, right? Those jobs were actually being done well before CMSs and well before the internet. Go all the way back to typewriters and file cabinets. It's actually a talk I used to give internally several years ago on this. I'll probably try to resurrect it. It seems like a good time to do so. And then with, Web 1.0, people had to actually learn HTML to actually get stuff out there on the web. And then tools were created to help just visually write HTML, right? These sort of old Web.1 sort of visual builders for the internet. But that was brittle as hell. That didn't work so well. They needed to be more control. And so CMSs were invented and came about, which was kind of a way to separate the content from the markup. Even WordPress, Drupal, Sitecore, other smaller website builders technically do separate the content from the markup. They're still tightly linked to the actual deployments, however, and that was, still where it gave rise to a second set of problems downstream. Headless CMSs came about, and that was only made possible by a few advancements. The first one was the ability for a system to speak the native language of the web. In our case, it's JavaScript object notation, otherwise known as JSON, REST APIs, RESTful APIs. I would say actually for all of our listeners, that required reading for, anyone in tech should really be, trying to think, a guy named Roy Fielding's PhD dissertation on representational state transfer. It was from the early 2000s. It's basically the seminal work on REST API architecture, and it gave rise to the current iteration, most widely used way to basically pass information around the web, known as just the APIs that we know and love today and are used to power composable experiences. And then finally, SaaS. So just the rise of SaaS, the ability to basically have scalable systems that were, where versioning wasn't an issue. It wasn't an on-premise deployment somewhere, and upgrades were also no longer an issue. And the problems that those were trying to solve was to really get business teams off of the engineering team's backlog, right? So what that led to was basically defining content in a very highly tightly structured way, the structure of which would actually be immutable, and the type of data rigidly controlled, no matter what the business people did inside of those fields. And so it still looked very, very much like, actually I should say, looked nothing like an editor, it looked much more like a form builder, but still very familiar form factor, because there were still slots for people to create and input whatever they wanted, but there was literally zero control over kind of where that ended up getting presented. And so that business people no longer had control over the front end. They no longer had control over the glass.
I was going to say, it sounds like that the developers, no pun intended, would have kind of wrested control, right, of this whole thing in that move, right?
Absolutely. And so that ended up having the effect of it swung the pendulum away from tools and tooling that was built primarily for business people towards developers, right? So for a long time, and this is still in a lot of industries and for a lot of types of tools, the way they think about it, but engineers were primarily what they work on are a way for non-engineers to actually get stuff done digitally. And actually this kind of swung a little bit the other direction back towards them. So in that process, authors, editors, and business people, marketers lost out big time. Most notably, they lost the ability to just directly edit a website. If you talk to most people, they own some piece of a digital experience, and they're going to obviously take accountability for that. And they're going to look at it and say, I want to change that. And they can't just go in and change that. They have to figure out how that's being stored and sort of like navigate to it and,
in the back end.
Yeah, exactly. And throw it out into the ether, it goes into a black box, and then all of a sudden some result spits out somewhere. So I think that's largely what is, that recognizing that the pendulum kind of swung towards the engineer side of the house a little bit more for the explicit purpose of making what they were trying to build more resilient, more stable, less brittle, less prone to breakage and to unexpected consequences of actions that were taken not by them. And also the ability for, to speak as what they're presenting was the native language of the web, to publish that really anywhere, not just a basic website, which could be very tightly controlled back end to front end, but actually it could go to destinations they never conceived of initially.
Mm-hmm. So what's the solution there? I mean, I clearly you can make the case for why the developers kind of took control, a lot more structure around the content that has enough. Now these business users kind of struggling with, I can't see stuff. If I'm making changes, I'm making it in the back end and still kind of blind to what that is. It solvable? How does it get solved?
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of seeing, now the trend where the same type of tools that were created to provide structured content, structured data, in the back end to make sure that, the apps that teams were building to deliver some digital experience across some channel are resilient and stable and structured and able to be iterated upon safely. They're sort of generating different ways of kind of what we would call previewing that content. So it generally still is not directly editing the production experience itself, but it could either be like a caricature of that. It could either be in a non-production sort of development or staging instance. In some cases, you are in fact sort of previewing production, where it's sort of like it's staged to go out and you're looking at a replica of production, but it's not quite there. There's a lot of different kind of ways to think about it. But effectively what you're trying to do is get as close to mimicking the production environment before actually making those changes, because of course there could be some iterations going on before you commit those to your audience.
Are you previewing web content? Are you previewing what are the limitations and is this something you can kind of fork this, you can kind of fake it out and show people what they would be saying? Is it just the web page? Could it be any different target that you've identified?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, given the highly structured nature of, at least in our case, in Contentstack space, the data we produce, it is the native language of the web. And so any device, any experience that is connected fundamentally to the internet, it could be experiences that are inside of a metaverse, like, second world, like virtual experience. It could be devices that exist within a retail store or at your gas pump or on your wrist or within some IoT device in your kitchen. All of those, or a lot of those increasingly are being connected to the internet to sort of be able to synchronously, or in some cases asynchronously, pass updates from a back-end system. And so if it's connected to the web and it can be sort of passed over to this destination, wherever that is, we could probably, in most cases, devise a way to have a preview for it. And actually, in fact, thinking through the customers of Contentstack, a lot of them are doing just that. I have examples in my head of customers who are actually publishing updates and previewing content, an experience as it will look like to their audience before it goes to production, both for experiences they're creating in live retail stores, on any number of mobile devices, whether it's their watch, whether it's a virtual reality or AR type of set, whether it's a phone, or it could even be, like I said, inside of an entirely virtual world, like a metaverse or like a Second Life.
That's very cool. So you had touched on REST API, and this might now branch off into a whole nother topic for you to come back and talk about, but definitely conversations going on around GraphQL and implications of preview. So, keep me honest here, but like, how should people understand the different APIs that they may or may not be using and implications for previewing or things to consider?
Yeah, and that's another good question. GraphQL it's not exactly a technology. It's utilizing all the existing technologies that we had. It's more of like a different way to, and it's actually in even the title, more different way to sort of finely tune and discretely query some data from a database. And so in the case of REST, and this is again just based on the underlying architecture and the design of a REST API, it's all URL based. And so you're basically just passing a URL. The user assumes that they're going to get back some amount of information as a response to that request. They don't always know exactly what that is going to be because it's going to be stored in ideally a highly structured way, but it is going to have n number of sort of keys associated with it. And the response they get back can change over time, and that's where we take great care in ensuring that our environment is highly stable, that if we ever have to issue a breaking change, which we almost never do, but if that ever were to happen, it's done in a very carefully controlled manner. GraphQL is a way for the developer themselves to actually define the structure of their data. And so that's kind of where it's a little bit of a different paradigm where, they're sort of creating the structure of that data on their back end, and then they're able to sort of cobble together a few different data types into one response. And so they're making a request in a very sort of syntactical way that looks just like, they're sort of typing out a very human readable request into a system, and they're able to get back something that is, totally bespoke to their use case, which may not be how the system originally may have been designed to give it, which is totally fine. That's kind of why GraphQL is really popular these days, because you're able to basically very discreetly, very precisely define the shape of the data that you're looking to get back. And you can build apps off of that. And so it prevents things like overfetching or underfetching data. Right now with, REST APIs, it sort of just has like one set of like the data has a very distinctive shape, and it can include some superfluous information that maybe isn't necessary for that application. And so, that could be a little bit of extra bandwidth that's not needed to be used. It also can be, could include not enough data, right? So then the developer has to write applications that are, making a bunch of different API calls to sort of cobble together a single experience. Whereas in GraphQL, in theory, you'd be able to make sort of, your app would make one request for a bunch of different pieces of information and get one response with everything they need.
And could they be intermixed in the deployment? Yeah,
absolutely. So a lot of our customers definitely do a mix of both. I mean, they're starting to, I think, try to standardize on one or the other. But app development is, a tricky enterprise. And so I think it's pretty common for us to see developers and our customers use kind of a mix of both. But of course, they're always going to favor one over the other. But there's instances where each one is more appropriate. And so that's why we offer, parity across both types of fetching data.
And then any kind of preview engine would need to understand then like both different ways to fetch and then to represent.
Yep, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So yeah, the preview capabilities that Contentstack offers, we look at trying to basically offer the ability for a developer to create experiences that are intuitive for their editors to sort of draft a story and push it out to their audience, and of course set up the tooling where they need to be able to sort of understand what they're about to push out to the world.
And maybe we can kind of build on this, and love to hear some of your experiences, but presumably there's just previewing a page, but in many cases with our customers, they're launching their campaign or something. There's something in the future that might be drawing on multiple different pages. There's probably a translation component. Like, how do things then get more like real and maybe potentially like more complicated in the world of like previewing pages? And I guess what releases, right?
Yeah, it gets complex. I mean, we think about some of our customers have hundreds of locales they're publishing to, and locale could not just be a language, right? It could also be, in some cases, a language. It could also be a region. So, in the case of, let's say, Benelux, it's whatever that is, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, possibly not in that order. But yeah, that region might be also a locale they're publishing to. There could be markets, and markets are defined and very bespoke to that organization. And so that's one layer of complexity. The second is, the company's ability to actually get different versions, sort of like where in the life cycle is that piece of content and that experience going to be for each market, for each locale, for each language, and the ability to kind of manage those independently. And all those kind of roll up into this concept of like a release or a campaign. And it can be not just for the text-based content, it can also be for media. So assets, videos, PDFs, things like that as well. So, all that has to kind of come into account, and it plays a huge role in a company's ability to basically be a functioning global, organization.
So you see that, is it almost table stakes that all of, these large customers are having some kind of release previewing requirement, but also solution?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, is something that we saw, as a pretty popular request from our customer base. And so, we were pretty keen, to find some solutions for them there. But you let me know whenever, we want to see some stuff and dive into the app.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I guess if we just pop into, on the, we don't need to do a whole, I guess, big tour of Contentstack, but it is notable, to kind of maybe jump into, before I even go to releases, I'll jump over to entries and we'll talk about, this concept of previewing, and we'll just kind of maybe start on the homepage here, which is kind of nice. So, Contentstack, we do provide, a concept called live preview. This is available for, of course, any viewport. So this is sort of some viewport a little close to desktop, if not between there and mobile, and tablet. But of course, we do have viewports across different mobile devices, and really any resolution you could be interested in. And so, if we want to go through and make some changes here, we can do so either just by modifying not only the text of the data, so I can see our top picks for hottest new items, if I could spell. But I can also not just modify text and images, but I can actually modify the arrangement of the data as well. So in this case, I'm actually moving my blocks all over the website. So this picks up not just the actual media, so the text and also whatever images, but also kind of how it's oriented, which is kind of nice because it actually means that it provides a level of control that really wasn't possible in a headless environment, until very recently, where not only do they get the ability to modify the little individual slots, but also have control over the look and feel, some design elements if they want, the sort of composition and layout of the page as well. So that pretty much provides, with some guardrails, editorial flexibility to craft an experience that is really focused on the story they're trying to tell and the audience they're trying to tell it to.
And historically, right, you would have needed your IT department to do some of these things, just, hey, change hottest new items or move this around. So they're able to solve that by going headless. Now it's a lot easier, but then we lost the view into any. So now we kind of connected the two. So we're seeing right on the left more like this is the back end and how it's been set up, and then how the business user can then actually where they're making the changes. But the right side now is like, that's now the front end, that's the head that they then get to see all of that in.
And I think that's the innovation. It's not just the ability to, copy and paste some data or reference an image into a predefined slot, because those end up becoming ordained by a design team and by a development team who's really disconnected from the actual business side of things and disconnected from the audience that business is trying to talk to over the web. But it gives, that second layer of control, which is the orientation, the layout, the composition, the look and feel, over to the author as well, to really just create that bespoke experience for the audience that they're looking to push that out to. And if we take it a step further, obviously, so let's do a thing where, so we changed the orientation here. Actually, I kind of did change it back, but while we're kind of looking at this, let's give this a name. Jeff, I'm not in marketing. What's a good headline here?
New fall lineup maybe, or?
There we go. We'll just pretend it's fall. Actually, we're going into fall, so this is perfect. And I put you on the spot there, but I'll go ahead and just save that. And so we added a new version here, and let's go ahead and add this to a release. I'm actually just going to go ahead and create a new release, and we'll call this fall campaign, and add this to fall campaign. What you'll see here as well is it's asking if I want to add all of the referenced information as well. So in Contentstack, we have this concept of references, which is pretty common across a lot of systems. But what's nice is that we actually do allow you to not only kind of view what references are available and kind of unpack that a little bit at several levels of depth as well, but it actually allows you to then optionally include those in your campaign. And so therefore, you wouldn't push a web page live, but be missing some unpublished piece of data from some other entry. So this is our fall campaign we just created a second ago. So we can see we have not only the homepage at the version we created, but also a bunch of other referred entries as well. I'm going to go ahead and schedule this for deployment, and I'll just say production on first day of fall. I guess it's September, but we'll say just September 18th. And I'll go ahead and set that to be deployed. And what's really cool now is I can go ahead and say, okay, I want to pop over to our release preview experience, which is basically a content calendar, which is going to allow me to go ahead and see that we have, I need to find my right environment. It was, here we go, fall campaign here in production environment, scheduled for the 18th. And if I want to go ahead and preview that, and that is our new fall lineup. In the entire site, so I can navigate around anywhere I want to go to, shop, men, women, jeans, whatever it is. The entire site will be reflective, not just the homepage. So in this case, I added only, one page with a bunch of dependency content. But I could have added, as many entries as I want. And basically that would be reflective of the entire site getting a refresh and an update targeted at this date. And of course, I can actually target additional changes to go out, and into basically infinity in the future. Taking this one step further, I can actually then compare these changes as well. So not only am I able to see what it's going to look like when the fall campaign is pushed out, I can actually go ahead and say, okay, tell me what the differences are here. But we'll go ahead and X out of that and just go back to our CMS. And
now we're translated to, so you could say English, you could see any other languages that you had set up for that campaign.
That's right. Exactly. So not only am I able to target any, environments that I have set up. So those environments could be, again, N number of environments with versions of the content across, AMI length locales and languages targeted to those environments. And so it could be, non-production, even in some cases, multiple production environments. And so you might have, in some cases, the need to have multiple concurrent production environments to do some targeting for some specialized, cohort of users, or to do some kind of testing. There's a lot of reasons why you might need, multiple environments in production. But of course, I can also target different languages as well. I kind of see the experience across those different locales. I could have done that in the website as well if I had a language toggle.
So yeah, just as you said, it's a full functionality, including if it was translated, you could fall down and see that.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep. So this is our release preview feature. It's fairly new. I think we came out with this just a few months ago. It's actually in our marketplace. And so, we have this concept of applications here in Contentstack. So I think most users should be able to see the marketplace. In fact, I think all can. If you don't have the permission to install, it'll just give you a request to install, and that'll go to your administrator. Basically, when you open the marketplace, we have a few different categories of things you can find. So there are apps, which are basically full-fledged applications that are built on top of Contentstack platform using our app framework. Those could be, applications that we developed. They're kind of basically features you can use to enrich the experience in Contentstack. In this case, it's like a sort of application or a plugin to our rich text editor. It could also be just integrations with third-party providers like Algolia for search, Primo for asset management, et cetera. We have a concept of starters, which is basically, websites in a box, automation recipes, which are ways to really find solutions with our automation hub, and then go ahead and just get those installed into your automation hub, and then basically populate, make the selections you want for your particular environment and with your particular provider. So in this case, some stuff with SmartLean, stuff with Algolia, and then guides. But to see an app actually get installed, and we can just even find that workflow, one which I was going to show here in a second. Go ahead and pop over to the app. You can see kind of the overview, some use cases, screenshots, and I can see where it is currently installed, which is this Prime Sales demo. And if I click install, I'll be able to get that installed in any other environment that I want. Notably, this app that we were just looking at, or these kind of couple, release preview, and the one I was going to show here, which is basically our Kanban workflow board, which is kind of neat as well, are deployed as, installed as like full page applications. And so they're actually live as peers or sort of siblings of our sort of primary modules inside of Contentstack. There's also a bunch of other areas in the user interface where apps can be installed. It could be like as a custom field or some sidebar thing or just some dashboard thing. So a lot of capabilities there. In this case, we are looking at providing very immersive, complex, comprehensive functionality through our marketplace, so installable as apps, but that do provide like a really rich experience and like some really, really meaningful functionality here within Contentstack.
From here, then, so I'd be able to see under maybe like a campaign would show up as completed, and I could preview it. These kind of late in terms of what we're showing in the workflow board and the release preview.
Yeah, exactly. So, we basically would be stringing together between our workflow engine, which is going to give us an idea of where all the individual pieces of a campaign are at through that workflow. So from like draft to some of the in progress stages, all the way through to completion. And then basically, at that point, the release would be ready to go all throughout that time as well, and able to preview as it's updated through those stages. So as translations come in, as content changes happen through the natural workflow, I can go in and basically check the changes to that campaign. And of course, the campaign is scheduled still for, in this case, need to go back to production, September 18th. And that as we're working towards that date, I'm able to basically, visualize the status of everything working towards that release. And finally, I'm able to basically make sure it looks all good before it goes live.
Thank you. Yeah, that was super helpful. Really brought it to life. Where are we going with this? Like what's on the horizon?
Yeah, I think we can maybe touch on a few interesting little Easter eggs and keep people on the hook. And so, there's a few, I guess I would say maybe directions that we're sort of starting to head into. If we look at the overall sort of content lifecycle and sort of how things are created, managed, published, then remanaged, and then republished, and there's sort of a iterative cycle there as well. The CMS historically has always lived somewhere in the middle of that life cycle. It's never really been at the sort of genesis or beginning of that sort of content and that experience. And it's typically not at the end as well. It kind of sits just in the sort of just-in-time delivery mechanism. So when it's, sort of ready to go live, it gets popped in the CMS, push it out, and then you go on to something else. We do, as we're talking to a lot of our customers and users, and just kind of seeing the natural evolution of things, we are seeing a lot of opportunity to basically bring and sort of immerse users and sort of hold their attention more in the CMS with regards to capturing additional jobs in that life cycle. That could be things around just basic user productivity, could be things around some project management capabilities, some task management capabilities, campaign and release management. And that's not to say that, we would obviate the need or have any sort of, direct confrontation with other applications out there that do this. Actually, a lot of our customers did this before we even realized it was going to be an opportunity for us, but they were integrating those third-party systems like project management tools, like content calendars, like planning systems, into Contentstack already, integrating those with our workflow engine, integrating those with our releases module. So what we're doing is basically capitalizing on the work our customers are already doing, and providing better experiences and ways to make the integration easier, ways to make visualizations of all that work and all that data easier. So, like a workflow board, et cetera, which in this case could be very easily linked up with statuses of Jira tickets within a project management tool. And so that's kind of on like the sort of earlier parts of the content lifecycle. We're also focused on kind of, the ability to tell the right story to the right audience at the right time, and more importantly, in the right way. And so that kind of leads us to, areas around more relevant and contextual and focused targeting of content. And I'll probably leave it kind of there for now, but it's a really interesting area for us. And I would say, definitely buy your tickets to ContentCon 24.
Awesome. Good plug there. We were talking a lot about workflows. I think that'd be another good topic just for you to have, come back and talk a little bit more about that, because there's, kind of the in-platform experience, and then how does that kind of flow with the rest of an organization, the tools that they use. And I think there's a lot there for you to shed some light. We usually have some questions that come in as we do our recordings, our sessions here. So Austin, do you have some questions for John?
Yeah, we got a couple here. This one is, are the live preview and release preview features all available today?
They are, absolutely. Yep. So those are available. Release preview is our marketplace. You can go through a search and find that and get that installed. And live preview is actually a native feature of Contentstack. So both of them actually utilize our app SDK, which is going to be sort of a singular way to extend Contentstack. So getting that stood up and put into your environment should give you access there.
And we have, I'll just a quick plug, we have show notes. So in this show notes for this episode, we can include any additional information on learn more about the feature, pricing, availability, and all of that stuff. But yeah, that's super helpful. I think that's everything we have for this episode. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon.
Be sure to check out the show notes for relevant links and content. To learn even more about the power of going composable, head to contentstack.com.